Hi, everyone. This is the last of our sessions for today. It's going to be a panel on tenant relationship management, and more specifically, how this was one of the top requested topics when we surveyed a lot of our customers. So we're going to use the panel today to explore basically how relationships with your tenants have evolved and where we think it's going. And so what we've heard from a lot of owners, both in the room and across our customer base, is it's fundamentally changed over the last few years, and the way we think about tenants is changing. And if we don't think about it differently over the next few years, we're going to get left behind. So I have a great panel today. We try to mix up to make it a bit diverse. So we have some large institutional owners, we have some more entrepreneurial, smaller companies represented, and we've also companies in the healthcare space. So we should get a diverse range of views. So just a quick introduction. I'm Patrick Kehoe, for everyone who doesn't know me in the room. This topic is very dear to me because my role at BTS is overseeing how we work with accounts. So our mandate is to make sure that everyone in the room here and everyone who's really using the BTS or Hightower platform is getting the most value. So most of you should know the account managers, or hopefully you do. If you don't, come to me afterwards and we can talk. But the whole account management team really has a mandate to make sure that you're getting value out of the platform. And we know it's as much about changing your organization as it is around using the tool. I also oversee the customer operations team, so a lot of the support and how we work today. So this topic, Mark Reverge touched on it earlier, how you retain tenants. This is kind of very linked to kind of how we think about our mission in BTS. So let me start. Just as a time check, we're going to finish at 4. If everyone remembers, we're running a few minutes over. We're going to try and get this on track for 4, and then we're going to go straight back into the main area, and Billy Bean's going to speak. So we're going to do brief introductions, and then we'll jump into the topic.
So the only thing between them and Billy Bean is us.
All
right, we'll be brief, right?
No pressure.
That's right.
So if everyone could, just on the panel here, just maybe introduce your name, your organization, just to give some context and scope, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, and I want to start off with an embarrassing confession. I was telling Jonathan I came in last night, and there was a Boston Properties function, and I saw our president, and he said, "What are you in town for?" And I explained real estate technology, and I'm actually on a panel, and he literally spit his food out. I was like, "Dave, Provost, and Leasing is..." So I have 4 teenage daughters, and I'm what my teenage daughters call a digital immigrant. And I am not very tech savvy, but I am savvy enough, and Patrick's here as well. We were savvy enough to work with View the Space years ago. We were an early adopter. And I got to tell you, this has been a fantastic day. I've learned a lot, and we're so excited. At the first part of the day, I was really bummed out because I'm like, it's like the human brain. We're using 2 or 3% of the capabilities of View the Space. But I'm getting excited. I can't wait to get back to the office and really dive in. We've learned a lot, best practices. Boston Properties, publicly traded real estate investment trust based in Boston, New York, D.C., San Francisco, L.A. I'm part of a 10-member team responsible for leasing new business development in Boston. That's Waltham, Cambridge, and Boston. And we've got a portfolio of 15 million square feet, 450 clients. Because we're an inch wide, mile deep, we do our own leasing, so our interface is typically with the tenant rep brokers. We do anywhere between 80 to 120 deals a year, 2 to 3 million square feet in leasing, so it gives you a sense of the volume, and that's us.
Great, welcome.
Jonathan Kaufman Iger. I'm the CEO of William Kaufman Organization and Sage Realty. We're a 90-plus-year-old real estate owner, manager, and developer. We do all of our services in-house: asset management, property management, leasing. We have our own design build firm as well. So you lease our portfolio just about every year. We're just over 3 million square feet in New York. We've developed 6 million in New York, and we've got portfolios in the UK as well.
One difference, you actually own your square footage. I'm just a leasing guy.
Kevin?
Hi, my name is Kevin Danehy. I'm with Brookfield. The real short story on Brookfield, it's a little over 100 years old, was known prior at the year 2000 as Brascan, to reflect the fact that it owned some timberland and a couple of office buildings in Brazil and Canada, along with a World Financial Center in Lower Manhattan. That was changed to Brookfield around 2000. At that point in time, we were an asset manager with about $10 billion of assets under management and had property in Toronto, New York, and Sao Paulo. At the end of last year, we had $260 billion of assets under management. We're in 35 countries and 100 cities. So a hockey stick kind of growth. 64% of the assets under management are in real estate, and we're in all the food groups, so office buildings, hotels, high-rise, multifamily, retail, and industrial. And we can come back to why strategically we did that. The growth has been rapid. The organization has stayed small. And so when we get into talking about tenant relationships and how that's evolved, we can talk more.
Great. Dave Casimiro from Northwest Healthcare Properties. I like the hockey comment there, being a Canadian. We're 142 properties in Canada, Brazil, Germany, Australia, and New Zealand. Traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. 9.5 million square feet and 1,600 tenants. So a pretty small square footage wise, but we have a lot of tenants. Transact, so our average square foot tenants are pretty small. And part of the reason being here is that we interact with them on quite a regular basis.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I guess first question, if we think about being more tenant-centric, can you just talk about how requirements have changed of end tenants in your properties or customers, as a lot of people here want to start talking more about them? Can you just talk about maybe the changes in requirements you've noticed in tenants and where you think that's going? Maybe start with you.
Yeah, so I've been in the business for 25 years, and I remember when I got in, I was a runner for this broker, and he said, the companies use their office space to attract and retain tenants, but nobody really meant it. It was just commodity. It was cost. I was with a client yesterday in Cambridge, and he was like, "Provi, I am in a war for talent, and if I don't win this war, I'm out of business." This is a mid-sized technology company. And so it makes sense, right? So a knowledge age company, the biggest determinant of their success or failure are the people. And the biggest lever they have is their physical environment to influence that behavior. And so I think it's exciting because it's decommoditized our product. It's more important than ever, but the prospective clients are asking more of the product. And so it's about space, their space, but also place. And Kevin, I heard you earlier, place making. All different names for it, but we're all untethered, right? So it used to be, okay, I'm taking 100,000 square feet, and everything's about what's inside there. Now it's, Kevin, I think you talked about it. It used to be you'd share the lobby. Now it's
You're stealing all my good stuff, John.
Yeah. He's like, you're gonna hear a repeat. Okay, you're gonna hear from me. This is pretty good stuff. But that's what it is. So I know we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And Jonathan, you had some great ideas. But it is a more sophisticated client. It's more important to them. It used to be dealing with CFOs. What do you do with the cost? You cut it. Now we're dealing with HR, talent directors. So it's just much more important. Founders of companies. So it's an exciting time in our industry.
Great. Jonathan, from the New York perspective, any?
Yeah, New York's always an interesting market. I can tell you, we've been in business 90 years. My grandfather, before he passed a couple years ago, was the longest tenured broker in New York, according to Rebney, 60 plus years. And for 25 of those years, he had a sign on his desk, and he liked to personally sign most of the leases, whether it was 3,000 square feet or 300,000 square feet. And the sign said, I am the lord and landlord, you are the ant and tenant. That sums up what the philosophy of old school landlords in New York, that's true, okay? And that really sums up what the owner and even broker, community really thought of tenants, even 20, 25 years ago. And Dave said it. Today, it's a complete 180. We are here as owners and as managers to solely provide value to our tenancy, and whether we call them tenants or clients or customers today, we are shifting much more to a hospitality-centric model in this world, and you're going to have to do that specifically for what Dave said, which is talent attraction and talent retention. It's the number one topic on everyone's mind. I mean, we don't talk about it enough in this country, but particularly in New York, the economy's doing quite well, but there is a tremendous talent drain. And for tenants in our properties, we make up, just like New York, most of our tenants are under 10,000 square feet. They're trying to attract the same talent as Goldman Sachs and Nike and Facebook. Those guys have market caps over 100 billion. They have office space over 300,000 square feet wherever they are. They can provide whatever amenities, services that they want. how can we as owners and managers provide those same level of services? We have the scale. We may not have the 100 billion market, but we have, our buildings, we average 500,000 square feet. We can start to carve out areas in our buildings to be able to provide those services. So
Great, thank you. Kevin?
So just to keep it in perspective, we've got a big global portfolio, but we run our assets and our markets on a very local basis. So I think the things that at least I've heard today so far and the things I'll try to speak about don't just apply to massive portfolios, but really have relevance right down at the asset level. We were talking about this war for talent. What we've observed over the last 5 to 7 years in particular at Brookfield is that the employees now are driving the decision making as opposed to the tenants themselves or the employers. So I remember I spent a lot of years with CBRE, and you'd always want to know where the CEO played golf or lived. And that really influenced a lot of what the decision was. Whereas today, it's where are the employees going to be most productive? And most productive is oftentimes driven by how you, from our perspective, again, create what we call or refer to in more complicated ways a live, work, play ecosystem, all right? Or, in some parlance, it's called a smart building because it's got a little technology in it. We kept it more simple and just call it placemaking. And so we've adopted that term of art, and on our biggest and best properties around the world, we call them Brookfield Places because we think that what we've been able to do is create an environment where the employees want to work. And oftentimes they want to live in nearby. Patrick was just saying he's got 2 young kids and he likes to come by Brookfield Place downtown on the weekends. And so if we can keep the employees of our tenants in the office a little longer or getting there sooner or able to go home and take care of the kids at lunch in addition to being energized while they're there, we think that's a game changer. And so, that's one of the observable differences I think that exists today and will be going forward, not just because of the millennials, but because of the new work habits that may have started with that generation in particular, but are being adopted by like everyone else who doesn't wear a tie except for me. Right.
That's great. That's great. Dave, just you're in Canada. You're in kind of the healthcare space. Like, how similar or different is it for you?
So our tenants are small and they're individual physicians the majority of the time. So the needs and the change of those needs are somewhat different than here. Our buildings are 40,000 to 80,000 square feet with some exceptions. So having that the ability to create common space or amenity space, we're a bit more limited to that. So what we found is, we've really brought on a lot of folks to get into their business, understand the personal relationship, try to develop that at their level so that it can be one-on-one. There is no CEO, CFO, it's the doctor. So we've had a lot of people, boots on the ground, to try to develop those relationships and try to work with the needs that they have, adapt our real estate as best we can to accomplish them. Poses some challenges.
Great. That was the first question on requirements. Now I'm going to shift to just in light of those changing requirements, how have you adapted kind of your approach to working with tenants or customers? What's kind of different today, or what are the different ways you're working with tenants?
Well, Jonathan hit on it. That story is a great story, and that's exactly right. Our company was founded in 1970, and I joined the company 20 years ago, and it was very much a landlord-tenant. And the first, Brian Coop, I don't know if he's here, our boss always says the first step to wisdom is calling things by their proper name. Should be client service provider. Landlord tenant, that's like serfdom, isn't it? It's like, it's absolutely crazy. So, and Jonathan hit on it. If the spectrum is, 1,000-year ground lease with the Church of England, you're not going to get any service to, I'm staying at this hotel tonight. They know my name. It's great. And because I've got a 24-hour lease. And so I think we try to take our cues from the hospitality industry, our property management, for instance, our security are dressed like concierge, like you're coming to a hotel. They're trained by hotel employees. And, it used to be you do a 10-year lease, here are the keys, I'll see you in 8 years or something like that. And just their needs are constant. So I saw Sam Schaefer, I think, was on your panel, and he said it well, and that you really think of them as partners. And you're constantly needing to solve those, solve their issues, and you can't do that if you're not in constant communication with them.
Great. Jonathan, maybe just examples for you?
So, for us on the macro level, like I said, everything that we determine, programs, initiatives that we roll out, it's dictated by how are we providing value to the tenant. And for us, the benefit of being long-term owner builders and managers is we're no longer focused on tomorrow's ROI. We believe that this is very much a long game. So we plan, design, build, and program, amenities within our buildings. And I think programming is a big key to that. But because you do that, you are not going to see the ROI tomorrow. You're not going to see another $5 in rent from the tenant coming in. But 5 years from now, when their lease is up, and you did your job right, and you move to this client service business and not this old school landlord tenant business, then you're going to see it. And they're only going to leave my property to maybe go to a Boston Properties or a Brookfield because they're also doing it. And so, we become brands. And so, we, outside of that, and, again, macro level, you can talk about value. For us, we talk a lot about internally that outside of health, wealth, and family, we believe time is the number one commodity. So if you ask me what Uber is, obviously it's a transportation company, it's an infrastructure company. To me, it just sells time. It's changed my life in the way that I live my life because rather than leaving 20 minutes earlier to catch a Knicks game or to meet Dave for dinner, I can now work 15 more minutes. I can be on a personal call for 15 more minutes and utilize that. So a lot of the things that we're implementing is based around that concept of time as a commodity and making sure that everything is just easy, wherever there's a pain point, and a pain point within our building. So we were talking just before this, visitor management is terrible, right? For any one of you who, we want to meet up afterwards, we're going to email back and forth. I'm going to send you a Cal invite. I'm going to forward that to my assistant. She's going to register you. You're going to come. You're going to show your ID. You might not even, it's our first time, you don't know what floor you're going to. That's a terrible waste of time. That's not an efficient process. There's no value to that. So what are the things that we can implement to improve that? And I'm sure we'll get to it, but technology is a big component of that.
Great. Maybe just to double click on that. So like when you talk about just coordinating visits, how do you get that insight in your building? Right? You talk about programming. What are the ways you're getting insights from your tenants, or how do you work with your tenants to kind of surface they're the right investments?
So that's a great question, and it's we do tenant surveys, right? We're very cognizant. So again, we have a large portfolio. You guys have large portfolios. We can data test, right? When we build a amenity space, we can put in beacons and see how people are using the space. But also, we just go up there ourselves. We bring our laptops and we work. My project manager's here, and we built an outdoor sun deck at 767 3rd Avenue, where we also put a 144-inch screen, outdoor screen. So now we do movie nights every couple of weeks for our tenants, and we test it ourselves. So do we enjoy this? So we're going to the tenants a lot for feedback, but we're also very cognizant, and I use this term in the office a lot. Like, we're not Steve Jobs. We didn't invent the iPhone, but we have that mentality that maybe in some areas, we know better as well, because the tenants also don't have this mindset. So when we meet with tenants, and I do one-on-ones with a lot of CEOs, CFOs, but also office managers, right? The people who are really boots on the ground. And we're asking them the questions of what do they want. They only want what they know. So if they heard that, a con being opened up in a building, they heard that someone has a gym in the building, or they never knew that they wanted us to provide umbrellas when it rains until we did it. So there's a lot of that as well, and starting to look at what are our pain points as a company, not as a landlord, and address those, whether it's on-site IT or remote receptionists, right? You're really becoming truly involved in the operations of their company, not just managing outside of it. So that's kind of where we land.
Great. Kevin, Brookfield, how is, obviously a much larger scale organization, how has Brookfield kind of changed its approach to working with tenants?
I'll use one example. Tenants over the last 20 to 30 years have been on a singular focused mission to increase the efficiency of the way they program and occupy space. But it's getting to a point now where it's I won't say it's perfect, but it's optimized, certainly compared to where it was in the past. So going forward, there's going to need to be new ways that the decision makers, the people responsible for the P&L, are going to be looking to use space. And so as we're thinking about amenities and retail offerings and arts and events programming, we're looking at how that can increase its presence or evolve up in the building. Dave mentioned before about my reference to the lobby, and if you look historically over time in the past, the only place that the tenant and the landlord or owner-operator of the property held in common is the lobby, right? I mean, that was where the two had mutual kind of passage or responsibility. What we're seeing with the installation of things like food halls and community exercise facilities and wellness programming, John just made reference to a company called Convene that we've become an investor in, and what Convene does is offers meeting, conference, and training space within an office building and an office environment. And so it will eventually, as it becomes more widely recognized or well known by large and small tenants, offer an opportunity for a company to program less meeting and conference space within their own footprint, which oftentimes goes underutilized, right, and shrink by 5 to 7%, and eliminate a fixed expense from their annual cost and shift it to a variable expense where they just kind of buy it where they need it. So you look at a boardroom, for example, how often does a boardroom really get used? Well, if we've got a boardroom in a not just orphan space within a building that's hard to utilize and just plug a conference room in there, but really have something that is serviced with five-star white glove, high quality hospitality type services, and is a terrific place with frequently refreshed technology to meet, companies are going to find that a desirable place to meet. And if we can't fill demand from the tenants in the building, we can just as easily go outside the building to keep it, close to fully occupied. So our ability as the owner-operator to maintain high or full utilization of a shared space is going to be different than the individual tenants will be. So we see over time tenants' occupancy, patterns shifting, where they'll have lower core occupancy requirement and start to become more comfortable, like with Uber and Airbnb, sharing other people's cars or homes, or in this particular case, meeting and conference space or a short-term flexible workspace in different ways than they ever have in the past.
Great.
Is that,
Yeah, no, that's great. Can you just talk maybe or touch on how Brookfield's working with its tenants differently in the last few years, or just maybe your top tenants?
I mean, one of the things we're working at is just being better partners. We grew fast and maintain a real historical focus, really at the local transactional level, and so particularly with the big banks and law firms and advisory firms, we've got multiple relationships, everything from the local deal level up to the C-suite, and revenue generators on both sides of the relationship. And we've just done a much better job over the last 3 years matching those up so that both firms view one another as a good partner. And what that's resulted in is, particularly in the emerging markets where we're building a spec 1,200,000 square foot building in Dubai, where because of our relationships with the sovereign wealth funds there, we actually own the land. And so we've been able to work with companies that have a global footprint where they're providing capital or advisory services to us and our tenants in London or New York. So we've already got a great relationship, and they're willing to take the chance with us in Dubai while we're still just a hole in the ground that they never would with a local owner-operator, because there's no reliability historically in that market with delivery time or quality of. So, right. I mean, is that kind of example?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. You're going to use, it sounds like, just to paraphrase, you are using your broader corporate relationships with some of your bigger customers to explore ways of doing maybe more business together.
And using the the B2B relationship to, it's more efficient to work with people you trust, right? And so there's a trusted relationship there. And something else I mentioned this morning is I've always found, and I heard it from someone else, but innovation is lumpy. And so if you find that something works well in New York and you can do it in Toronto or in Sydney, and you can do it with a company that is experiencing it with you in one of those places, we find that we're able to drive innovation and new business practice across our organization and in partnership with these other tenants much faster than we otherwise would.
Great. Okay, Dave, just
Sure.
how does it change for you?
Just touching on a couple of the points, we've localized our management teams, our portfolio teams, so that they're physically living and breathing in the buildings with our tenants. So if our tenants are complaining about issues or looking for amenities, our team is echoing that and feeling that as well. Things like building Wi-Fi, tenant surveys we do. We have tenant advisory committees, so sort of town hall type scenarios for them to provide their feedback and insight. We have an external advisory committee as well, so folks in our industry who aren't our tenants provide some insights. And we've really gone through a process recently where we've had to revamp our what we call our tenant welcome package. So new tenant and renewing tenant. Someone earlier today said sometimes we take for granted the existing tenants that we have in place. So we were so heavily focused on that new tenant welcome and approach, where sort of forgot a little bit about the ones that are paying their bills for all of those years. We've done a complete revamp, and the feedback has been absolutely positive. And the retention pieces, we've seen just in a short period of time some uptick on that. So there's a couple of examples of what we're trying to do, where we've changed in the last handful of years to try to meet our tenants' needs and requirements.
Great. Okay, next question. Just
Can I just add to
please.
that? Because their needs are, and again, your tenant's a little bit different than our clients, but their needs are constantly changing. And, I can't tell you that we have a saying at BP, the closest thing we have to a free lunch is an early no-bid renewal. And, because, right, now you're competing with everybody on the block. And I can't tell you how often when we talk to our clients, they look, I got 5 years left on my lease, I can't do anything. Forget about that. Forget, what do you need? Just listen. And it's really fantastic because now you're not in a negotiation, you're just structuring it in a very different way. And you have to work with accounting and things like that of, unamortized TI and all that stuff. But if you really start there, you can really do some exciting stuff.
Right, with their kind of end needs in mind. Maybe just spending a bit of time talking to each of you, can you just share maybe with this group an investment you're making in your tenants that you're excited about, and maybe just the why behind it, right? There's lots of different reasons you can invest in tenants. Some people, could be retention, it could be you believe it's strategic to the asset. Maybe if you could just highlight one initiative you're driving that's exciting.
So we bought 100 Federal Street from Bank of America in 2012. If you're familiar with it, it's called the pregnant building. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but that's what it's called. And it was really like the lobby was tough. I mean, it was like you lose your will to live as you walk through it. I mean, there was a painting from 1942, and it was like you felt like you're going to see a big First National Bank of Boston. And there was a soul-sucking windswept plaza, half acre, and beneath that was just the shittiest corporate cafeteria. And we got this, and we asked Bank of America, who built the building. They were like, we hate this space. I mean, this is just awful. And so what we did was we said, look, why don't we convert the lower level to parking? That kind of drove some revenue. And then Patrick and his team have put together plans. It's actually under construction, a 25,000 square foot glass pavilion with 4 restaurants, fast casual. I mean, what you've done with a food hall, we're taking our cues from that. And it's flexible social space. You talk about the screen. We've got a media wall, which is 35 feet long by 12 and a half feet high. So you can imagine with Comey's testimony today, we're trying to create a kitchen table, right? Everybody come down. And, that's a $40 million investment, and our return is minuscule, well below our what is required. But people understood that, to Jonathan's point, if you don't do this, you're irrelevant. And we ended up doing a 400,000 square foot deal with Putnam Mutual Funds to move there. And it wasn't a question of, I'll pay more for that. I'm not coming if you don't do it. Right. And so anyhow, that's one where that's the place. That's the place making that that Kevin was talking about.
Great. Jonathan?
Yeah, so since we're at a VTS conference, I guess we should tout technology a little bit. And what we're most excited about is a tech platform that we're going to be rolling out probably the following year. And that's an ecosystem app that will be open to every tenant in our building. And obviously, if you're not a direct tenant, but you're an employee of a company within our portfolio, you'll have access to it as well. It'll be building specific. And the platform really is to address everything that occurs within the building. And I don't think we've really defined it, but this concept of workplace as a service. So, not to kind of take you through the whole app, but, we're starting our own QSR concept because we don't have the space for a food hall, and we want to be able to control kind of the food that's being provided, but also the experience. So,
Can you just share what QSR just is?
Quick service restaurant. So like Sweet Green, Pret, more on the Sweet Green side, a little better quality. And so your experience in our building when the app launches, and if one of the properties has the QSR in it, will be when you're within 4 blocks of that property, you'll get a notification of, do you want your regular breakfast? And you'll have stored your regular breakfast. And if it's a coffee and a Danish, and you haptic touch on it and say, yeah, that's what I want, or no thank you, or I'm in the mood for something else, and just like Seamless or Grubhub, you go on and you select what you want, it's going to be there waiting for you, and your credit card will be installed on it, just like, in Uber. You'll come in and the phone will act as your billing ID card. You'll go upstairs, and if you or your assistant or someone else needs to book amenity space within your own tenancy or within the building, you'll be able to do that. Our building managers will be able to communicate with you through that. You'll be able to toggle on and off the notifications, but fire and life safety, those things, you won't have the option on. But we'll communicate with you that, it's Tuesday movie night next week, and there are still 6 tickets left for Casablanca.
So maybe just for people in the room here, like for those that have capital partners and they maybe want to do that, like what's your financial rationale? What are the metrics you're trying to drive in your properties behind those investments, right? Or what's your long-term kind of goal?
Increased rents.
Okay.
I mean, we're not selling our properties. We've been developing since, like I said, the early 50s in New York, over 6 million square feet, and we typically just don't sell. So we have the benefit of thinking very long term. And like I said, we were talking about this earlier. You're not going to see the ROI today. You'll see it on a qualitative basis. Your gut, or we were talking, like using VTS. You'll start to see maybe in one of your properties that you've launched the app that you haven't in another, or that you're providing this workplace as a service or amenities, or you have a convene, you might be leasing space quicker a little bit. Or that first year, you're getting fewer complaints from your tenants, right? The ROI is 5 years, 7, 10 years when that lease is up. And that's the way we look at it. And once you are patient in that sense, it opens up a lot of possibilities to start to do these things. But if you're thinking you're going in for 2 years, you're going to put this in, I think everyone on this panel realizes that a lot of people don't, and this would be one of my big takeaways from this is not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they are not going to come. You need to program it, and that's the key.
Great. Kevin, you want to share maybe an investment Brookfield's?
Yeah, so just, it could hit a number of those different points that John was just making, but the consistent with our placemaking strategy, we don't look at the retail as the primary revenue generator in our office buildings. We look at a number of our retail malls, we own those as well, as opportunities to transform properties and shift from what the retail has historically been as a destination to go buy something, but is rather something, is a place that once the customer is there, whether an office tenant in the building or a visitor, they're a resident from the local area, they happen to be there to see one of the arts and events that we spend money on. So we believe, I've seen it in our marketing material, so I'm sure it's true, but we're the largest private sponsor of art and event, temporary art and event programming in the world throughout our portfolio. And the reason for that is we want to give people reasons to come and visit the properties. And so the former World Financial Center downtown, Lower Manhattan, was a really stark place. You went there to work and then you went home, and it was like a bad old movie. Today it's thriving, but it's because we spend tens of millions of dollars creating different kinds of events to attract people. We had the America's Cup trials there last spring, and that was one of the first real big threshold events after we'd speculatively invested $400 million in the property, and we had 100,000 people just on Sunday watching the races. So the people come down there and they spend time and they see things. they go into the retail, but the retail isn't the most profitable part of our portfolios. As John was saying, our strategy and belief, but it's intuition that's driving it right now, is that we're going to fill the buildings up when we have vacancy faster. We're going to retain tenants at a higher rate than we otherwise would, and we hope all three, we're going to drive higher rents in the building upstairs. The opportunity for VTS to make us all a lot smarter and more productive is to be able to measure that. Because historically, and even now, we don't know what the data is or the metrics are to really be able to measure that, and we don't have a historical database, even if the data is out there floating around someplace, with which to quantitatively measure that the things we just talked about, they actually happen. What is the cost benefit, right? We know at the end of the day that it happened because we've got more revenue than we do expense, and the ROI meets or exceeds what the forecast was, hopefully. But on a day-to-day basis, those things are all what we're investing right now in our properties in order to make the tenants want to be there.
Great. Dave?
I find this fascinating because the majority of people that come to our buildings go there because they're sick. So accessibility to technology, so Wi-Fi, digital directory boards, and code, building codes, ramps, automatic doors. As codes change, your real estate ages, we have to remain relevant, or else they're going to move to a building that has all of that and meets their needs. Infection control, janitorial. It's constant. It's constant. We have to be constantly changing and investing in our properties to be able to meet those requirements. Yeah, we do capital. I want to come to your buildings. That sounds amazing. But their needs require us to invest that way. Not that they don't want to have a beautiful food hall. It's just they may go there for lunch, but the people coming to our buildings are not going to be going there. It's just a different asset and a different caters to a different clientele for sure. So.
Great. Maybe just one last question. I want to open it up for questions of the audience here, and just whoever feels passionate, just jump in. But what role do you see technology playing in this shift, becoming more customer-centric and really understanding the needs of your tenants? What needs to change in your mind? Maybe it's not. Feel free to share tools you're using today, but just.
But Patrick, this is the commercial real estate industry, so we don't need to use technology, right? Nobody does.
Yeah, but if you just want to share maybe just thoughts around what needs to change in your organization technologically, or even if there's tools you're using today for surveys, I'm sure people in the room might be interested.
Well, what Jonathan was talking about, and this is more aspirational. We're not doing this now, but Kevin talked about it. It used to be just whoever the top person in the office. Now it's the power of many. And as Nick said, this is a supercomputer in your pocket. We're doing a tower for Salesforce in San Francisco, and every employee will have an app called Comfy. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's pretty cool, right? So you say I'm a little hot. You hit it, and you're going to get a blast of cool air for 5 minutes or whatever it is. That's unbelievable, and it's security. It's everything. It's how do you make the building work for that individual through the smartphone? I think that's what we'd love to see.
Jonathan?
That's it. It's the smartphone. It's always in your hand. Like I said, we actually spend time like in our lobbies and seeing how the tenants interact. We work down there, for a number of days on and off, and that experience, particularly for a woman who's coming in and it's raining, they got an umbrella under one arm, they got coffee in a hand, they've got their purse, they're trying to take out their building ID card, but you know what? They actually have also between their hand and the Starbucks coffee cup, they've got their phone, and everything that we're doing, we believe in platforms. So, the buildings that we own, those are physical platforms. The services that we need to provide, obviously, is the service platform, and the technology is what combines the two and allows you to really provide those services.
Great. Just anyone want to comment on how they, you talked about interacting with the tenants and talking to them a lot more. What do you use to track kind of notes from meetings with those, or just contacts and relationships there?
So we, from a work order system, we have building engines, obviously accounting, Yardi, and VTS. So prior to any of all this, it was your traditional spreadsheets and meetings and notes. And we created what we call an online leasing database, so proprietary, internal, which we're going to be doing away with. But at the end of the day, getting it all to talk together so it's on one spot. I don't have to go to 3, 4, 5 different platforms to find out information on a tenant. It just sits there. Leasing manager, property manager, you can just look at the information and have to organize a meeting or go to the tenant separately, kind of go into that meeting to get it all together.
Great.
I told my fellow speakers from Blackstone and Tishman Speyer this morning when we were warming up that Brookfield has a fully integrated global CRM that tracks every single relationship within the organization. And with you hitting a button or making a call, you can get to anyone in the world. And they just looked at me and their eyes glazed over, and I said, that doesn't exist. Nobody's got that, but it would be nice, right?
So did this audience.
It sounds like BTS
I
is
felt
next
for it twice.
module.
Everything is completely fragmented and spread all over the place, and it still comes back to people knowing who to call and being able to do it in 1 or 2 calls instead of 7 or 8, because no one ever gets to the 3rd or 4th. So we don't have a CRM, and the biggest obstacle to that is human behavior and the fact that people don't want to work differently than they have up to this point to achieve the success that they have. So it's a big obstacle, and we haven't figured it out. But just to tack on to what you were asking before about, Patrick, and that is the technology that will link with the tenants. As I was saying before, we believe that the building is going to shift from fully multi-tenant private space except for the lobby to 5, 10, 15, 30, 35% of the building shifting to this shared workplace that will then become of mutual interest to both the tenant and the landlord. And we think there will be incredible value in having a technology backbone that will be of use to both. And so we're well along in looking at that ourselves, but that was a big part of why we invested in Convene. So we're developing a platform. We currently have in some of our buildings now the ability to use a mobile app to get through the turnstiles. And we're moving toward that so that it'll provide 5 primary functions: security, food and beverage, concierge, tenant services, and some type of community or communication function. But it'll serve as a platform with whatever the best local practice is to plug into it as a point solution. Because we see the apps, whether it's Starbucks or Ritual or a lot of the other ones that are available, is constantly changing, but needing the Brookfield Connects app over the top or portal to be the one of consistency. And then what we think that'll do after it creates a much more frictionless experience is create opportunities to deliver services and products that will allow us to generate more revenue.
Great. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions in the audience because we have like 10 or 12 minutes left. Any folks here just have questions? Yeah, if you could just give your name, your company, and then ask the question. We'll have I think someone has a mic. I think it's a small room, so feel free to just stand up.
Sarah Catherine Norris with Vista Holdings. While technology we're all using and we have all these new applications for everything, how important to you all is the human connection still for tenant retention? I feel like so many times the tenants don't remember you until the day before you're coming to them to renew the lease.
It is a great point. We talk about technology, but I remember some of the best advice I ever got was from my mentor when I was a commercial real estate broker, and I think it's still true, and he said that commercial real estate is a contact sport. And don't forget it, the most expensive lunch you have is the one you have by yourself. So it is still, you got to get out, you got to listen, you got to ask the questions. And our best partnerships, our best relationships are when our clients over-communicate. That's our job to make sure that we're still in front of them. And it's something that we struggle with, some team members here. We want to make sure you're not stretched so thin that you can't have those relationships. Everything doesn't have to be transaction-based. But I'm with you, to lose an existing client or not even to know their needs and to lose that is painful, no doubt about it.
Great.
Yeah, I think the relationship piece, that personal touch is critical, but technology can assist in facilitating that. And so, we're here talking about, we're at a ETS conference here. It's utilizing that technology to further develop that relationship while maintaining that personal touch where, you may have had 5 face-to-face meetings, maybe it's 1 with a couple of emails and a phone call or whatever the combination may be, a text, and utilizing that technology to further strengthen, develop, maintain. They have to work together.
Great. Any other questions?
I got a question, just real quick. So, it's Brandon back here. everyone.
What company are you with, Brandon?
As everyone knows, so not too long ago, WeWork recently signed a full building deal with IBM, right? So we'd always thought about WeWork as, onesie, twosie, a couple of desks, and, they'll do these short-term co-working spaces. And now we're talking about rethinking the owner-tenant relationship model. In that instance, IBM has made WeWork effectively their interface point for their user experience in an entire property, right? I think they're thinking about 700 or 800 people are flowing through that property. What's your read on that? How do you guys think about that? Is kind of WeWork installing themselves in, as kind of effectively the landlord of record for a large corporate?
I'll go first. Great question. We do a lot of business with them. It's interesting. One of the speakers said, disruption happens at the bottom of the market. And I immediately thought of WeWork because what they did was it's an opportunity and a challenge, right? So the opportunity is they're aggregating demand of non-traditional users of our product. The creepy guy at Starbucks, the kid in the basement, all that stuff. Bigger, 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 bigger. And where's Matt? And Matt's here too. I'm not going to say you were the creepy guy at Starbucks, but I was walking through WeWork the other day and I saw Matt making his calls. It's very interesting. They started at the bottom of the market, and now at the top of the market, they're starting to disrupt. That's absolutely right. So IBM's a client, and what our clients keep telling us is, and I think Kevin used the term, give me frictionless real estate. And so we've got this, and Kevin, you talked about it earlier eloquently, which is they want short-term, month to month, whatever, but the ability to stay there forever and price certainty and all that. And we need to finance these things with long and strong credit. So the business is changing. I think it's exciting. Does IBM at the end of the day need to control their culture and their brand? Are they willing to give that up? I think the answer is somewhere in between, but it's an opportunity and a challenge. And we do a lot of business with WeWork. We think they're very innovative, and we're learning a lot from them.
If I could, I wouldn't want to be the bank holding the 2.5-year, the 20-year note, 15-year note on the WeWork lease that is with IBM that expires on a month-to-month basis in 2.5 years. Where we see, and we love WeWork, we've done a lot of work with them, we think they're incredibly creative, but the place where we're seeing great value in what I'll call flexible term workspace, which is we think one of the answers to the big disconnect between where tenants want short-term flexibility and landlords need long-term, predictable cash flow. Otherwise, we can't finance or sell our properties. And so at the margins is really where companies most often, if you ask the forward-thinking, growth-oriented companies, where do they really need the flexibilities around the margins? It's around the 15% of the space or less where they have the ability to fluctuate, and or the project teams or the vendors coming in to serve their needs. And so what they're oftentimes willing to, at least today talking about it, and we're putting this in a couple of our buildings, pay more for is the ability to occupy space for 10 to 200 or 300 people and pay some multiple of the rent that they would on a long-term lease basis. To be able to occupy 10,000 feet of space on a month-to-month or 1 or 2 year basis at the margins. And so that's where, when I say we think that part of the building that we occupy, a 1 million square foot building, will shift into shared space, that's part of the amenities and the offerings we think the best tenants in the world are going to want to have in close proximity to them.
Great. Let me just give room. We have 2 more minutes left. Maybe just one last question from the audience. Maybe name and company.
Jim Berbernation with Taurus Investment Holdings out of Boston. Quick question. I know David and Kevin, I think you mentioned both came from the third-party brokerage world before you went in-house. How did your approach in dealing with tenants, wanting maybe larger tenants trying to secure a deal as a third-party broker, but now you're in-house, did it change at all as far as your approach to tenant relations, working on the ownership side of when you previously?
Yeah, so I was a tenant rep broker, and I just have a tremendous amount. We talk a lot about brokerage, the future of it. I just have a tremendous amount of respect when a tenant rep broker walks through with that client. I know what's gone into that relationship. They are an intermediary, but a very value, and they're not brokers, right? I mean, now they're really truly advisors. And so it just gave me a lot of respect for that relationship. I see a lot of people say, hey, call around the broker, go directly to the tenant. The tenant has hired them the prospective client has hired them as a buffer so that they don't have to do that. So I think it's respect.
What I've been able to do is act as a translator. So I spent close to 30 years as a tenant rep broker and leading the outsourcing or a portion of the outsourcing function for occupiers at CB. And I've learned a tremendous amount at Brookfield from an owner, investor, developer's perspective. And there's such opposing perspectives, but as we, as a broader industry, converge and have mutual interest in, this shared space, we need to have a better understanding of what each other's, needs and the opportunities to work together are. And I mean, the last comment I would make on that is one of our large financial services tenants told me yesterday that they have a digital pulse program within their space that just tracks, public postings of their employees, of all their digital and computer programs. And they're not doing that to be Big Brother. They're just trying to figure out how to better, optimize the productivity of their employees, but they can only do it in their own space. And so if this larger digital backbone that we've all been talking about exists, then we have an opportunity to really do something together.
Great. With that, I want to say a big thank you to the panel. Thank you to Dave, Kevin, and Jonathan. Yeah, give it up. Thank you.